Well, joining us now is former broadcaster turned speaker and grief expert, Peter McGugan. Welcome to What She Said, Peter.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, people may, of course, remember you from City TV and CBC, but for the last 20 years, you've turned your attention to understanding what grief is and how people can move forward with their lives. So tell us how this came about, this change from broadcasting to speaker.
I had a whole lot of loss when I was about age 30, just a tremendous number of deaths. And because I was writing books and speaking all over the place, I was eulogizing. And I was looking for something to help me, something that would speak to what I was feeling, what I was going through, and nothing spoke to me. The books didn't speak to me. There was just very little out there. So I started to kind of write my way out of it. And so I wrote a book that became kind of a classic. It was called When Something Changes Everything. And then the research went on. I became fascinated with the new science of consciousness and essentially how intention and thoughts and emotions interconnect and how it affects health, how it affects relationships, and the interconnectedness of our world. And
Did you let me stop you there for a second. Did you look at that from a journalistic aspect? Because for me, the cynicism maybe comes in. It all sounds a bit hippy-dippy. So did you see sort of a story in there that you wanted to delve into and see whether this stuff worked?
I did, and I was interested in the new science of consciousnesses, and so I used journal-published, solid, peer-reviewed science and in order to understand that intention is a powerful force, that the energy that you are being not only defines the present moment, but it's a powerful architectural force for what you'll be experiencing in the future. So, for instance, Dr. Candace Pert wrote a brilliant book called The Molecules of Emotions that showed us that we're creating hundreds of millions of cell divisions every hour. Each cell has a peptide that operates a little bit like a satellite dish, and that the energy that you are being when those new cells are created is what those cells are attuned to. And so if you're being bitter and feeling resentful and cheated by life, you're going to be inclined to be feeling more of that. And the neural pathways in your mind, your brain, are going to be running in that direction. So changing behavior starts with changing the energy intentionally.
That's interesting, because one of the things I used to tell my children when they were little and they had pouty face on, I said, if you just smile, even if it's fake, you will start to feel better. And that's true, really, isn't it? There is some kind of scientific fact behind it that if that's what you put out, even if it's just a smile on your face, that things can change. Absolutely.
And it's almost impossible to stay angry while looking up. I mean, things are interconnected in ourselves. And so a lot of people make the mistake when they're grieving of thinking that the best way for them to honor their loved one that's departed is to grieve, and that their sorrow is the connection to them, or that they're honoring them by being depressed and sad and a sad sack. And it isn't, because the better way of honoring who that person was, what you shared, the joy that you shared, the sweet spots in time, is to be grateful for what you had and to be the love, to feel and be the love for them rather than the sorrow for the gruesome ending. Grief is wanting something we can't have anymore. And so the adjustment that we make is that there's been a chapter change in your life if you're grieving now, and we kind of have to begin again and learn some new ways.
Well, I mean, when you said you experienced a lot of loss, you did. The actual number is 28 people in your life died from a variety of causes and reasons in the space of, just a few months.
Yeah. It was a season of loss. I think it was what was supposed to happen for me to do what I'm doing and to deliver what I delivered. My two best friends died 28 days apart. I would have been turning to either of them to deal with the loss of the other, and neither of them was there. And it was devastating. And so, how do you come back from devastation to love living life again?
And then your house burned down.
And then my house burned down.
I mean, there's another. If I wasn't laughing, I'd be crying again. It's like this. How did you move forward? This work was very therapeutic for you, and you decided to go and help others with what you have found, and you have launched Grief to Gratitude .net. Now there's documentary films on it, audio programs, meditations, but you also have obviously some humor in there because Jerry Seinfeld and Carol Burnett have contributed to this site.
Yes. They very generously offered wisdom from their life and their journey, and I have a conversation with Jerry Seinfeld and Alec Baldwin, and it's profound. It was like a big wow moment for me in terms of understanding how creativity and how to come back from disappointments.
Well, let's tackle a few of the misconceptions because we promised we would. Time heals all wounds, or time heals grief.
That's what people say, and it doesn't.
It comes in waves, as far as I've experienced in my life.
Grief does come in waves. It's like a puzzle. Grief is not the same for two people in the same family going through the same loss. The same thing that will be a breakthrough moment for one person is not a breakthrough for the person grieving beside them. But grief is a journey, and we were set up to feel disappointment when they read us stories once upon a time that ended with happily ever after. And we kind of expected on some levels that being a good little prince or a good little princess, we would live happily ever after. First of all, happiness is not sustainable. It's a sweet spot in time when all the conditions for our happiness contract with life are met, that we feel this joyful moment of happiness. But what is sustainable is contentment. Okay. And if you become a student of your own contentment, what makes you content now? What do you love being? What energy do you love being? And then be more of that energy. This is a really great exercise for your listener. Get a piece of paper and a pen and write down on the left column the energies that you spend your days being now. And are they frustration? Is it resenting? Is it loneliness? Is it despair? Is it hungry? Like, what are the energies that you're being throughout the course of a day? Then on the right-hand side, make a list of the energies that you love being, the energies that feed your spirit and your soul and energize you and help you to love living life. And then make some intentional choices about being the architect of ways to be more of the energies that you love being. And what you will feel is a new relationship with life and yourself.
Is grief a big deal in our culture, say economically, say for the economy?
It's huge. It's the big chasm that we don't really look closely at. Grief costs the North American economy more than $102 billion a year in absenteeism, in people becoming sick, in automobile accidents and mishaps on the job. It's a huge, huge thing. It costs insurance companies tons of money.
Tons of money. So what's your advice then for moving forward with hope for people? How do they change their mindset?
Hope doesn't do much. I'm not a big fan of hope. Hope doesn't change very many things until we do our homework, until we do our research, until we get smart, we get resources, and then we activate that hope. And we take actions in order to make what we're hoping for happen. And at that point, intention becomes involved, and we've kind of moved beyond just hoping to making it happen. That's the key, I think, and that's what Jerry Seinfeld and Alec Baldwin are talking about, is just not sitting there hoping and expecting what you're wishing for to knock on your door and find you, but it's that you've got to put yourself out there in order to make the connections that you want.
That's something I've noticed Anderson Cooper is doing. They're talking about the loss of his brother years ago, as well as the loss of his mother. It's a very revealing personal conversation. Sometimes it's I think a lot of it has to do with having someone to talk to about these things.
It is. And this is shocking to me because just 3 weeks ago, I saw some research that indicated that millennials, 26% of millennials do not have a best friend. 24% say they don't have acquaintances. 1 in 4 millennials is relating to the world through a smartphone or an electronic device, and there is no safety net for them. What's happening with them is drugs, addictions, all kinds of bad stuff. And these kids who act out in violent ways, this is where they're coming from. So grieftogratitude.net gives them a place to go. I made one of the films on the website is called The Edge. We went into a gymnasium in Northern California and put a big piece of tape across the middle of the gym and said, if you have experienced this, cross the line. If you've experienced violence at home, cross the line. If you experienced depression, and it was mind-boggling how much these kids are going through without a lot of support.
The site is grieftogratitude.net. Online resources with films, as you said, audio, meditations, and journaling exercises. Peter McGugan, thank you very much for telling us about it.
Pleasure. Thank you.